First off, I would really like to thank the Florence Public Library for giving us this opportunity to speak to all of you today about Pompeii. I'd also like to thank the Department of History at UNA and Dr. Lowe. I think most of us, if not all of us, went into this class last semester, and I think we were all a little bit overwhelmed, for the lack of a better word. Sorry, true. But that being said, I don't think, and as you can tell for all of you that have heard all these great presentations today, there's no way that I could have picked a better group to be with. Dr. Lowe was very enlightening with everything that he shared with us, and this group of people that we took this class with, I mean, it was a really great experience. So I think I was very blessed because I do think that we all helped each other to survive ancient Rome. But without further ado, what I'm going to be looking at today is Pompeii politics. Now, this was rather difficult for me because this particular area could really have went in a number of different directions. It was very difficult to narrow down a thesis. It was very difficult to really weigh my opinion. I think Livia pointed it out earlier that, you know, when you sit there and you look at a situation and you really start digging and you dig, and then all of a sudden you realize that you kind of hit a wall and you realize that you kind of need to go in another direction. So I felt really, really torn in a number of areas with Pompeii politics. However, I did finally decide on a thesis, and the thesis boiled down to, is Pompeii truly a democracy? So I'm going to give you my take, and I would be happy to hear your take. But first of all, we'll start off with Pompeii itself, the location of Pompeii. Pompeii is located in present-day Italy. It is located at the base of Mount Vesuvius. Obviously, the eruption of 79 AD will preserve a great deal of what we study today about Pompeii. Now, very similar to a great deal of Europe, Pompeii will be conquered by the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire here, of course, will take a great deal of Europe. Pompeii being located in present-day Italy there is certainly in the heart of the Roman Empire. So make no mistake, cultural diffusion most certainly took place within Pompeii by influential standards of the Roman Empire. So first off, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a few of these political offices and see maybe who qualifies and maybe who is disqualified from holding certain positions. First one we'll look at here is the aedile. The aedile here is a junior magistrate in charge of public temples, buildings, markets with responsibilities of games. Think of it almost like a manager. You know, if some sort of big production is being put on, this would be a manager of that particular game. The Chiron here would be a local town councilor, very similar to what we see in our towns and cities today. We have town councilors just the same as what Pompeii would. Military Tribune, now this particular position is more of an honorific title. It doesn't really bear much power at all, but it is put in place at the demand of popular citizens. So people that were maybe talking with the right people, maybe rubbing the right shoulders, you know, associating themselves with the right people. This right here would be a good title for them. But the thing about it is, the thing to keep in mind, this title does not bear a great deal of power. It's more symbolic than anything. Next would be the patron. A patron is a man selected by the town council to protect the community's interest within Rome. Again, key being the town council. They will select this particular position. Q-star here is a junior magistrate in charge of public finance. Think of it almost like a treasury. You know, a lot of our cities, obviously our nation today has a treasury department. That particular position would be reserved for that. The quinquennial duumvir is a magistrate elected every 5 years to carry out the census of the population. Now, again, when you compare it versus the United States today, we have a census. It takes place every decade, every 10 years. So, very similar, Pompeii does have some characteristics of what we see today. Within our civic government, or within Pompeii's civic government, we have magistrates. You have a duovia, and you have an aedile. On the other hand, you also have a Senate. Now, Senate, obviously, we have most certainly seen that in Rome. So remember always that cultural diffusion is reflecting what Pompeii now is starting to look like. The Sherion here is recruited mainly from the ex-magistrates. They will hold office for life. The list of the Sherions will be revised every 5 years. The minimum age will be about 25 years of age. If you look at our Senate today, the minimum requirement is 30 years of age. So I really don't think there's much coincidence here. I do believe that part of what the United States represents today most certainly has come from Europe. Now, in the Senate, if you're a part of the Senate, you are most certainly a part of a distinguished family. There will be some honorary members, but you most certainly, again, have to be among the elite. The members have to be born free of birth. I know Katie talked about slavery earlier, so you have to be born free. You cannot be a slave, you can't be lower class or anything of that nature. You also have to have property requirements. You have to have some sort of property ownership. These are qualifications to be a part of these positions, and make no mistake, these people most certainly could not afford, in a lot of cases, they could not afford a lot of land, so again, a position reserved strictly for the elite. The Ordo here, which is very, very powerful within Pompeii and Rome for that matter, will consist of about 123 people, 63 families in the year of 223 AD. When you really compare the grand population, it's really not all that many. So therefore, the elite is in control. There are ways to be elected. First of all, distribution. You really have to associate yourself with tribes, with cities, towns, districts, regions, anything of that nature. You have to make friends, and it's not just going around shaking hands and moving on to the next person. To make friends, you really have to establish a relationship, a meaningful relationship, so they can remember who you are and they can always associate your name with voting. Now, if you are lucky enough, you might make friends with the right people, and if you make friends with the right people, what you could do is you could actually form electoral compacts. People that maybe were a little bit more advanced than you, people that maybe had a little bit more impressive of a resume than you, what you could do essentially is you could become friends with them and they could turn around and help you, which we'll look at some examples here shortly. It's very important to establish notoriety, word of mouth. Now, bear in mind, this is an age way before social media, way before Facebook, way before television. So word of mouth it's essential here. It's key in order to gain that notoriety. Programmata and graffiti, which again, we'll look at some examples here shortly. This is the way of advertising. Again, way before social media, what you're going to do is you're going to have to give the community some sort of visual aid to recognize your name, so when the time does come to vote, they will pull your name as opposed to someone else's. Because you are campaigning to the point that you don't have enough time to go around and post all this graffiti and programmata on your own. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to hire a scriber. And finally, if you want to really go over the top, if maybe achieving those electoral compacts just simply isn't enough, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to contribute to the community in some form or fashion. Whether it's renovating a theater, whether it is putting on gladiator games, these will be ways that you can connect yourself to the community so the community can appreciate what you are investing. Now, I do have some examples here, and I am not brave enough to try this from the top of my head, so I am going to use a little bit of help here. So, slide number 7 here is an example of programmata. Now, this particular slide will represent Veternium Capricinium, Licinium Sextinium, Cominium Atrinium Capinium, and Hocinium Crucinium. Now, what they're doing here is they are campaigning for an office. And so in this particular case, what you're going to do is you're going to put these in the most busiest spots that you could possibly imagine in Pompeii. And I really think James did me a favor earlier by talking about walkways and talking about, how important it is to walk by certain houses and different things of that nature, because I really do think pragmata plays a bearing into that. All right. My next one here, again, notoriety is key. So if you are a hired scribe, what you could do is, as you are advertising for that particular candidate, you can always slide your name there at the bottom. That way, when the public sees that person's, that candidate's name, they're also going to see you. If it's an established candidate, what they're going to see is you are associated with that person with the impressive resume. So that's kind of what we see here. Now, the electoral compacts, this is, again, where you're trying to associate yourself maybe with somebody with a little bit better reputation than what you have. Maybe somebody that is most certainly established a little bit more than you. So, this particular image is Licinium Verenium Hypsinium and Caecilium Marcellum would be a electoral compact establishing that association. Also, we have Cominium, Gavinium, Ruffinium, Marcinium, Hocinium, Persinium, and Cassinium, Passim, Pedimium, Sacinium will all be associated through this electoral compact. Again, it's all about notoriety. Now, if you fell out of favor with someone, if for some reason you did something that that candidate no longer approves of, they can refuse you. You can hire scribers that will pretty much establish that you are no longer connected, that you can reject their endorsement because of some wrong that they've done to you. Now, going back to the gladiator games, as we mentioned this earlier, a lot of my paper kind of focused on this a little bit. One person in particular, which we're going to get to him on the next slide. Unfortunately, a great deal of these advertisements did not survive the test of time. All of them were located in the house of Trabius Valens. Gnaeus Elias Nedius Maius will be actually my prime example that we'll get to on the next slide. Satrius Valens, Marcus Halconius, Rufus Marcus Halconius Celer will be all examples of people that are advertising their gladiator games, trying to get the endorsement of the community to support them in their endeavors. So, big question here that I had to really address is, can the lower class, could they ever emerge as the elite? The answer is yes, but the path is extremely limited. There's two major ways you could do this. One is priesthood. Now, priesthood is going to be bestowed upon people that are a little bit more popular with maybe the elite. This is a way that they can gain a title, but maybe not gain a great deal of power. But make no mistake, they can certainly rise in the social ladder. It will be a whole lot more difficult than I'm sure that they would like. The second way here is, of course, we've mentioned this already, games, public contributions, again, renovating a theater or putting on a gladiator game. These are good ways that you can really kind of get your name out there and really get the good graces of the community. Maius here will be my example. I picked him for a number of reasons. I picked him because he initially was born in a lower class. So he was really not born in the elite, but what will happen in time is he's actually going to be adopted by an elite family. Again, notoriety is key. So him being now Gnaeus Elias Nedius Maius, he will actually take several steps forward on the social ladder in order to establish himself within the community. Very different than our times today. A lot of people are not going to dig around and actually find out the details. All they're looking at is this a family name that I can recognize? His certainly was. So as a result, it opens up new opportunities within Pompeii and for him. His contributions to the public game will definitely give him some notoriety, so much so that they actually give him a nickname, which is going to be the Chief of Games. As a result, he will hold many positions. He starts out, of course, in the priesthood spectrum, but the family-oriented name there allows him to propel up the social ladder. Now, These particular slides are pretty interesting because, and again, this kind of goes back to James's point that he made earlier with the walkways. Notices for the election of 79 CE here. If you'll notice, a great deal, yep, the corner works. So a great deal of the traffic will take place in this particular area. The main reason why is because it's very busy. It's a street that's going to constantly be traveled on, so therefore people are going to see it. Very similar here in Florence with Cox Creek Parkway or Florence Boulevard. That's where the majority of your advertisement will be. And so when we look at the election here, that's exactly what's going to take place. Now, you will see some in different places, sporadic places within Pompeii, but the majority of it there will be in a very busy section. Distribution is very important. Now, when we really consider a lot of the electoral notices that have been discovered in Pompeii here, now the area, of course, that I showed you on the last slide is, of course, heavily populated on this slide. But the change is you see more electoral notices in different spots, in different regions. And the main reason why is they're located close to people's homes. Going back again to James's point of forcing people along certain walkways so they actually view what they want you to see. And so the example I'm going to give you here is Caecilius Marcellus. If you'll notice, his house is right here. And if you'll look real close, the dots here represent all the electoral notices that will represent this particular candidate, which is, again, right outside his home. So the problematic patterns that we see, obviously they're put in busy districts. We've seen that on the last two slides. They're close to the candidate's home that's running for office. They're located close to the elite. Now, if we really break things down, a lot of your slave quarters, a lot of your lower class, they're really not going to have a lot of advertisement there. You're not going to have a lot of pragmata. You're not going to have near the advertisement, near the inscriptions that you would in the elite areas. The main reason why, and this is where I really took a stand on my thesis, is slaves and the lower class just absolutely do not get the right to vote. The main reason they don't get the right to vote is because their job doesn't really entail it. What they do for an occupation doesn't require them to be able to read and be able to write. And as a result, they leave the majority of Pompeii illiterate, and the decision-making goes to the elite, which will make the grand decisions in voting campaigns. Now, what does this mean? What does illiteracy mean for Pompeii? Well, what it means, the graffiti and the pragmata, it's only designed for the elite. Why else would it only be located within the elite neighborhoods, within the busy neighborhoods? Why would they leave the slaves and the lower class completely out of the picture? This is designed strictly for the elite to consider. Simply put, this is similar to the rest of the Roman Empire. Again, remember, cultural diffusion takes place within the Roman Empire. So Pompeii is not any different than anywhere else. What's going to happen is the focus point of society will be based strictly towards the elite, therefore representing very little democracy within the city of Pompeii. In the end, Pompeii portrays a simulated representation of democracy. I really could not find enough evidence to prove that there was truly a democracy that took place in Pompeii. There was times that I really did consider, okay, this is a democracy, but really the facts that I come across did not convince me that this was a truly democratic society. So the million-dollar question is, why in the world do we look at Pompeii? Why in the world do we study Pompeii? The answer is right in front of us. We have to look hard, because the things that we've considered today is you have to, as a campaigner, as someone who is really trying to sell themselves for political office, you have to establish a reputation. You have to advertise. You have to form government impacts. You have to contribute to the community. You have to let the people know that you stand for their voice, even if you don't have a voice. If we look deep enough, I guarantee you we can actually find some similarities between ancient Rome and the United States today. Some of the examples I've provided for you here, some of the campaign posters that we've seen in our community, within our nation today, In this, what you can see is you can see all sorts of things. You can see electoral compacts. Down here at the very bottom, you see the compacts that are taking place between a presidential and a vice presidential running mate. You can also see on the far right-hand side up here where they're trying to kind of tear at each other's reputation a little bit. You know, sometimes campaigning can be ugly. Sometimes campaigning does not represent a positive election. In this particular case, it certainly doesn't. And we see this within Pompeii. So, if we look hard enough, if we look deep enough, if we really analyze the inscriptions of Pompeii, what the meaning of those inscriptions look like, and if we continue to be lifelong learners and we continue to really embrace exactly what Pompeii offers us, we may find a little bit of ourselves, as we did with Franklin Roosevelt and the advertisement for his presidency. When you compare the two, in a lot of ways they look different, but if you really analyze what the meanings represent, we're really not all that different. At one time, the United States wasn't a democracy. Pompeii, had it existed beyond 79 AD, I think there's a great possibility that they could have emerged out of the society that they were living, but unfortunately they didn't have the chance. Luckily we did. So today we do have a more democratic society than what Pompeii had. However, we shouldn't judge Pompeii too harshly. Any questions? Yes, Kate.
Do you happen to know why Gnaeus Nigidius was adopted by the upper class family?
You know, I never found out, but I found it just unbelievably fascinating because, again, you know, just the amount of things that were, the amount of doors, I guess, that were opened up because of his association were just, it was unreal. Just by that name association. Him and his brother both, I know they were adopted, so I'm not sure if like maybe a parent passed away and it was like a necessity type thing. I really could never find that, and I'm not sure if there was really ever a true answer there, but yeah. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Was there a difference between ancient conceptions of democracy and modern conceptions of democracy? When the Greeks and Romans said democracy, would they mean the same thing that we mean when we say that?
I don't think so. I truly don't think so. I think that you definitely see shades of it. I think you definitely, you definitely, I mean, it's just like us today. I mean, the way the United States is shaped today, I mean, we are considered a democratic republic. So we do take shades of the Greeks and the Romans. But again, we're not exactly the same. And I think that's the reason we're classified more as a democratic republic, whereas the Greeks would be more of a democracy and the Romans more of a republic. So in my opinion, I didn't find enough proof to that. Yes, sir.
Just a comment. It's interesting. I like your parallel with today, and you remind me of some of the negative graffiti. You know, like the crooks and the drunkards thought this candidate or that candidate. It's as dirty then as it is today.
It is. It absolutely is. So, and that's that. To me, that was the most fascinating thing about digging into this was we're not all that different. I mean, in a lot of ways, when we compare it, sure there are some differences, but in the grand scheme of things, we're not all that different.
So you'd say these programmata are like the memes that we plaster on the walls.
You got it.
Our virtual wall today.
You got it. You got it. The only difference is it took them a little bit longer to chisel back then as opposed to us time.
Ancient Roman social media, they have Facebook, they have walls.
You got it. Any other questions? Thank you all very much.